So this is the image. I think it's for the poster for the movie, the Dutch movie Cloaca. It's a an odd image of a woman covered in looks like feces, like she's just emerged from the cloaca of some reptile, I presume, and this is like a vampire. I don't know, some Satanist or something. And this is a much larger image, and it just looks like an initiatory practice of some kind. It's in the movie as part of a play, so it's like a movie within a movie, and I think that it's more important than you would think, because it's in the poster, and it's there's something deeper implied by the play, whereas the movie itself is more shallow. But I think there's a connection between what's going on in the play and in the movie, and you some sort of initiatory practice. You can make up your own mind as to what you might think that would be.
Incredible force. This wouldn't be happening. The legal consequences would be enormous. This would be slapped down by law enforcement. This would be shut down by judges, the court orders. People that are implementing it would be going to jail for child abuse, for negligent harm, deliberate harm, sexual, all kinds of crimes. But they've brought this other stuff under the cult view of queer theory. Queer Gnosticism is now infecting the thoughts of our judges, of our law enforcement, of our politicians, of our lawmakers. And they don't want to be homophobic or contribute to transphobia or any of these kinds of things. Because everybody knows, just like back in Plato's day, that this is not good, that this is not okay. It is actually rooted in everything, literally everything, moral good, reasonable, evidentiary, sensible, etc. And so you have to queer those things so that they can have fake experts coming out and pontificating and confusing with their cult doctrine so that they can advance and continue their cult initiations, which involve using our children. But lest you think I'm overstating this, I'll put it in their own words from the Drag Queen Story Hour paper just to remind you. In this article, we explore the pedagogical contributions of a program called Drag Queen Story Hour as a form of queer imagining in an early childhood context. These are the first sentences, by the way, of the paper. This is the abstract. This is their own summary of it. Through this program, drag artists have channeled their penchant... Sorry, this is the first paragraph. It's not the abstract. Through this program, drag artists have channeled their penchant for playfully, quote, reading each other into filth. That's a pun, but it's also very obviously that they are reading you into filth. They are initiating into filth. Right? It's clearly an initiation into a worldview. Drag artists have channeled their penchant for playfully reading each other into filth into different forms of literacy, promoting storytelling as integral to queer and trans communities, as well as positioning queer and trans cultural forms as valuable components of early childhood education. See, that's them queering early childhood education. They're trying to make it seem like experts believe and agree that these things, these queer and trans cultural forms, are valuable components of early childhood education. That's so that the experts, when they show up to court, will confuse and befuddle the judges who would normally be shutting this down with tremendous prejudice. We are guided by the following question, they tell us. What, and this is all in italics, the whole question is in italics, what might Drag Queen Story Hour offer educators as a way of bringing queer ways of knowing and being into the education of young children? They then go on to say, ultimately the authors propose that drag pedagogy, which is what they call what they're doing, provides a performative approach to queer pedagogy that is not simply about LGBT lives. In fact, it's barely about them at all. It uses them, but it's not about them. But, and all in italics again, living queerly. So you're introducing children into an entirely new way of living. That way is queerly living. And Drag Queen Story Hour is a preparatory introduction to that, because it's a cult initiation. More specifically, on initiation, they say, we believe that Drag Queen Story Hours, this is the words that they used, we believe that Drag Queen Story Hour offers an invitation toward deeper public engagement with queer cultural production, particularly for young children and their families. It may be that Drag Queen Story Hour is, quote, family-friendly in the sense that it is accessible and inviting to families with children, but it is less a sanitizing force than it is a preparatory introduction to alternate modes of kinship. Here, Drag Queen Story Hour is, quote, family-friendly in the sense of, quote, family, as an old-school queer code to identify and connect with other queers on the street. So, as I said, they're using coded language, that's a cult tactic, to say one thing and mean another, so that they can set up an opportunity for a preparatory introduction, which is an initiation that overcomes childhood innocence, because initiation and innocence are in a binary, intentioned opposition with one another under queer theory that has to be resolved, and they're doing that with your children. And calling it family-friendly to trick you. That's what's going on. It's a cult initiation. So that's fully introduced. We've only got through the introduction. Let me make the big... We haven't even done the big picture case yet that I said I was going to start with. That's the introduction. Let me make the big picture case now that queer theory is queer Gnosticism, and then we're going to turn around and look at how the theorists make this identification go very deep. I'm going to try to be somewhat quick with this part, though. It's not superficial, though. It's very deep, as you're going to hear. It's not like... Queer theory is not like a Gnostic cult, into whatever they mean by the word queerness, which we'll discuss. It is a Gnostic cult, where the gnosis means knowing what it means to be and live queerly. I guess be queer and live queerly is grammatically correct. So queer theory is queer Gnosticism. Technically, it's queer Marxism, but Marxism is a peculiar form of Gnosticism. In fact, it's modern Gnosticism. Queer theory takes it postmodern, so it's really a form of postmodern Gnosticism. The basic idea of queer theory as a Marxist theory is that there are certain people who get to call themselves normal. They get to define what it means to be normal, especially with regard to sex and sexuality. Also gender. They get to define the terms of normal sex, gender, sexuality. Sometimes fat, ability, etc. draw off of this and other things. Okay? So there's a peculiar kind of cultural property that certain people have access to for reasons that don't seem clear, that they're granting themselves access to. Then they created, it's called normalcy, being normal, and they then create a definition of normal that means themselves, so that they can gatekeep other people out of it. So that creates a two-tiered society of the normals and the abnormals. The normals are the ones who have the cultural power. The normals are the ones who get to decide what counts as normal, and they use that to fence out and exclude the people they call abnormal. That sets up a conflict in society, a stratification and conflict in society, and so the people excluded from that have the opportunity to awaken to a queer consciousness of what it means to be excluded by being considered abnormal. This is the same as the proletariat gets to be have the opportunity of being awakened by what it means to be exploited as a worker and alienated from the product that they produce in Marxism. So rather than capital being the form of bourgeois cultural property that has to be destroyed or abolished in order to achieve communism, you now have normalcy being destroyed. The people who have the means of production under communism, the bourgeoisie, their means of production have to be stolen from them. They have to be seized. We're going to seize the means of production. Everybody thinks that means factories and stuff. But Marx believed that the human and society are downstream from economics. So if you seize the means of economic production, you seize the means of human production. You seize the means of societal production. And so you're actually seizing the means of human and societal production through economics. It's a very important distinction people need to understand. Well, here, the abnormals, the queers, as it were, have to figure out a way to seize the means of production of what it means to be normal. But it's a little more complicated than that. It's not factories, it's cultural, and it's extremely entrenched, and it's obviously really rooted in biology, so they're not going to succeed at that. So instead, what they do is they dissolve it. They dissolve it constantly. And that's the basic idea of queer theory. It's acidic, deconstructive assault on the concept of normal, but it proceeds along the ideas of a Marxist conflict theory where the special form of bourgeois private property that has to be abolished so that the means of cultural production can be stolen from the people who currently hold it are the people who call themselves normal. That property is normalcy. That has to be normativity. It has to be stolen from them. It has to be abolished. And the queers doing queer activism, meaning we're going to hear how technical the word queer is. I'm not using it as a slur for gay people. It's nothing like that. It's a political identification. It's the same as being class conscious, frankly. They have to be able to abolish normalcy and seize the means of production of what it means to be normal and acceptable in society from the people who are doing that. Now, in Marxism as a form of Gnosticism, what you have to understand is that the means of production are the artisanal means of producing society. You're producing society, you're producing man through economic structures, through economic tools. So in other words, in Gnostic language, the people who control the means of production are like what's called the demiurge. In Gnosticism, which I guess I have to summarize a little bit, the demiurge is the evil demon that actually creates the world and does so to imprison people to his own benefit. We have to keep them from eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil, because then they'll be like us, like the gods. So we're going to lock them.
When was the last time you did a proper cleanse of your intestines? Maybe you do them often, maybe you've never done one. But when most people hear the word cleanse, they envision juicing vegetables into strange green concoctions, or maybe drinking the old school lemon juice and cayenne pepper liquid without any food for days or even weeks on end. That's enough to scare away even the most hardcore health fanatics from ever doing a proper clean out. Not to mention all the juicing equipment and expensive fruits and vegetables that you need to buy just to starve yourself for a week. Luckily, there's a much more convenient way to cleanse your intestines and to do it quickly without having to change your diet. It's called Zupu from Unzu. Zupu is a natural supplement containing a potent mix of herbs that are proven to evacuate your bowels quickly and safely. And it's so easy to do. Just take 2 capsules of Zupu at night along with a glass of water or 2 if you want it to work even faster, and go to sleep, wake up, and go about your day. For most people, Zupu kicks in during day 1. Continue taking 2 capsules every night with water, and in no time, you're going to be flushing out more toxic waste from your intestines than you ever thought possible. Most people store pounds of fecal waste inside of them at any given time. Zupu will flush this out for you fast. Click through to read all the reviews of Zupu and learn more about how you can get started on your Zupu cleanse today. It's safe, convenient, and best of all, you don't have to waste all of your time juicing leaves or change your regular diet habits during the 15-day cleanse. Shipping is fast from our local Boulder, Colorado headquarters. You'll automatically get a risk-free 60-day money-back guarantee as well, and you'll even earn rewards points towards any future Unzu products that you might also want to try. So if you're ready to cleanse the right way and potentially drop pounds of poop waste from your body in a matter of days to weeks, then give Zupu a try for yourself, completely risk-free. If you don't like it, we'll happily refund your purchase, no questions asked. Click through to learn more about Zupu now.
There's nothing more powerful than you making your thing happen.
Some of the stuff that is launching in our summer collections.
Going all in, playing by your own rules, and running your business from anywhere. Like really, anywhere.
With the art, I always want to really connect with people.
Doing what you love, turning your process into inspiration, and building a brand that's all yours.
All the flavors start coming out.
Being unstoppable, sharing so much content, and going viral, because the platform is built to handle it.
Thank you guys so much for supporting Save the Fox Rescue.
Making the world a bit better, and knowing that doing things right will take you far. When there's nothing holding you back, what would your thing be?
Out of that, and if they violate it, we're going to kick them out of Eden. We're going to lock them in a world of suffering. We're going to imprison them away from their true nature, which is as gods. We don't want them to awaken to the fact that they are human beings are already as gods. That's what the demiurge does. So it is, demiurge comes from the Greek demiurgos, which means artisan, builder, person in control of the means of production. So here, in Marxism, you have a Gnostic framework that the proletariat is excluded from the means of production, from demiurgic power. The demiurge is the bourgeoisie, and it is controlling everybody and setting the terms of society to produce man through things called like material determinism. And what has to happen is the dialectical materialism has to wake up in the class-conscious proletariat to overthrow the whole system. They have to become Gnostic. They have to adopt socialist consciousness. They have to get socialism as their gnosis, their salvific true self-knowledge, that they, in fact, are oppressed historical agents who have the power to transform history if they just get together in solidarity, class solidarity, and seize the means of production. In other words, become the demiurge themselves so that they can unmake the prison of being bit by bit. And it's exactly the same in queer theory. The exact same thing, but the property is no longer the material means of production. It is the means of cultural production and social production around the word normal. Who gets to decide what's normal? Now, Marxism is not purely Gnostic. Marx was very Gnostic, more Gnostic than Hegel in the kind of formal Gnostic sense. Hegel was a Hermeticist, though, and Marx incorporated Hegel's dialectic into his dialectical materialism, and so what you end up with is between Hegel and Marx is a blend of Gnostic and Hermetic principles. The way that I tend to phrase this is that Gnosticism is the motivation in Marxism, and Hermeticism is the means. So when I say about modern Gnosticism, which applies to queer theory as postmodern Gnosticism, I mean that the Gnostic impulse that we're imprisoned in the universe of being, then being itself is the motivation to act. It is the source of the salvific self-knowledge that can liberate you. But the mechanism by which you do it is the Hermetic transformational process, the dialectic, as laid down by Hegel and appropriated by Marx. Aufheben, which is to abolish but yet to keep and to see from a higher perspective. The dialectical sublation, which is often phrased transformation. It's achieved through the clash of opposites, of intrinsic opposites, and thus their synthesis, where you remove the distinctions between things that seem to be different, or that are different, or that are fully distinct. Good and evil. No, they're two sides of the same coin. Man and woman. No, they're two sides of the same coin. You just aren't understanding from a higher perspective. That's the idea. And in the process, you obliterate good and evil, and everything becomes relative. And you obliterate man and woman, and everything becomes gender fluid and ambiguous. That's the idea. So Gnosticism is the motivation. They feel imprisoned in their very existence. But Hermeticism is the means. And what they're actually doing is blending those, because the mechanism that they're using is Hermetic principles to seize the power of the demiurge, which is the power to imprison and make suffer those who you are over or that you control. But the mechanism by which they get there is through removing distinctions, and that's the Hermetic part. The distinctions are an illusion. We'll come back and talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Let me finish up a little bit more about Gnosticism, because we've talked, but I point you again to the podcast that I did before, because we talked about Gnosticism and haven't talked about Hermeticism yet. But Gnosticism has this evil creator demon called the demiurge, which means the artisan. The demiurge is actually a demon. The snake in Genesis, according to the Gnostics, the serpent, which is Satan, is telling the truth and revealing the fact that the character called God in Genesis is this demon, this created the world as a prison for the holy spiritual man. In queer theory, it's that normal is the demiurge. In Marxism, it's that bourgeois is the demiurge. In CRT, for example, it's that whiteness is the form of property that creates a white supremacist demiurge in white Western culture. Once you kind of understand this, though, the contours, this is the big picture part, the contours of queer theory as a Gnostic theory become really clear. They become really clear really quickly. You're trapped in a body. You were born in a body, but you didn't get to pick your body. You're trapped in a body which is like a prison. Your soul, whoever you think you really are, your mind is trapped in a body. And you were put there in that body against your choice and against your will. You didn't ask to be born at all. That's why you're in a prison of being and existence itself. That's what Heidegger referred to as the flungness or thrownness of being. We've been thrown into this world against our will. Woe is us. We must lash out and gnash our teeth and wail against it. And we've been geworfenheit into a body that was assigned a sex at birth. So some medical authority came along, looked at our genitals, and assigned us a sex. They gave a word, a categorization. They named the distinction of our body, which has nothing to do with who we really are, according to this, which is a profoundly dualistic view, just like Gnosticism. And we are trapped in a body that got assigned a sex at birth, and we have to go through a forced or non-consensual puberty eventually that ripens our secondary sex characteristics and tertiary sex characteristics and gender characteristics as such later as we develop. We didn't ask for any of that. And so if I feel like I was born as a boy, but I'm in a girl's body, I got flung into the wrong body, and I'm trapped there. And the reason that I get treated like a girl, even though inside I'm a boy, is because a doctor said, you're a girl. And society said, yeah, you're a girl. So you had a sex assigned at birth. They tell you what you are. They don't know what you are. They don't know your soul. But they told you who you are based on your mundane, fallen form, your body. In fact, the grossest, crudest part of it, your genitals, the most dirty, fallen part, and I mean fallen like fall of man, original sin, fallen part of your body, your genitals are used to determine through medical authority, which they claim is a form of illegitimate power, who you're going to have to be. And then your parents are like, oh, she's a girl, we're going to raise her as a girl, we're going to make her wear girl clothes, we're going to tell her what it means to be a girl, we're going to make her play with girl toys. You hear all the things that they do to screw up kids because they think that this is wrong. They think that the parents in society, oh, she's a little girl, she's so pretty, she's getting called strong or whatever. Oh, look, she wants to play with dolls and flowers. She wants to have a tea party. She doesn't want to play with trucks or throw the truck against the wall to break it, as all the boy moms understand immediately, just because they can. They think that that's socially imposed because a doctor looked at their genitals and decided, we're going to call this thing, based on its fallen, dirty, perverse, profane sexual organs, we're going to call this thing a girl, we're going to raise it as a girl, and society's going to raise it as a girl, and everybody's going to consider it a girl. We're going to reify its sex and gender identity as female through social norms, expectations about sex, gender, and sexuality. This is a big key to how queer theory works, and we'll turn that key and unlock it through our looking at Michel Foucault and Judith Butler later when we return to this. But you can see immediately how this is Gnostic. You were born into a body which imprisons you. It doesn't matter who you actually feel like you are. You were given a body. A doctor told you what that body means. Society inscribed, your parents and society inscribed that meaning into you through rampant social conditioning, and now you're trapped as a girl when in fact maybe you feel like a boy. And you're imprisoned. Or maybe you're a girl, but you feel trapped into having to be girlier than you actually are. And that's a prison. But you can actually save yourself through having secret self-knowledge, esoteric self-knowledge of who you really are. We could call it, and I'll call it here, I don't know how often they call it, your gender soul. Your true soul, your true Platonic or Neoplatonic form. And knowing that provides you the pathway to salvation and escape from the prison of your being in your body.
So, at about 42 minutes into the podcast, The Queer Gnostic Occult, Dr. Lindsey says something about reading. He's reading off of the Drag Queen Storytime Hour paper, scientific paper or something. It says reading you into filth or initiating you into filth. And I would just argue that this is a graphic sort of symbolism of initiating you into filth, in the sense of the goddess of the sewers of Rome, Cloacina, the Venus Cloaca, was the goddess of the sewer, And I would just say that this is a remnant, or a sort of that this is representative of that practice that would be more universal than, say, what you'd find in Rome. And also, I just wanted to read from the perspective of this channel, Malkuth, the Simulated Reality, that on the Wikipedia page for and it's you can find this on pretty much any page, but it says some occultists have likened Malkuth to the cosmic filter which lies above the world of the Qliphoth, which is here in the painting. The above the world of the Qliphoth, or the Tree of Death, the world of chaos, which is constructed from the imbalance of the original Sephiroth in the Tree of Life. For this reason, it is associated with the feet and the anus of the human body, and the feet connecting the body to earth, and the anus being the body's filter through which waste is excreted, just as Malkuth excretes unbalanced energy into the Qliphoth. Although Malkuth is seen as the lowest Sephiroth in the Tree of Life, it also contains within it the potential to reach the highest. I would just say that this connection between the anus and the reproductive organs is dialectically synthesized through the cloaca. That this idea that there is a sort of reptilian sort of birthing, whereas where you have the merging of the excretory organs and the reproductive organs into a kind of singular sexual and reproductive and excretory facet that can find itself in this goddess in Rome, referred to as Venus Cloaca, that is both the god of fertility and the goddess of what would you call it, cleansing, or through this reproductive act, and so you can sort of connect this act of reproduction and cleansing through the city. So the city itself is cleansed, like the sewers of the city are like an analogous to the excretory organs of the human being, and through the reproductive organs, there's sort of an analogy, a parallel between the structures of the city and the structures of the human body. And you go back to the fall of man and the need to clothe oneself as humans, and that expansion became greater and greater as man continued to fall, until man built cities, and that these cities were sort of an extension of the body and an extension of the fall, and that the reclamation from the fall was something that you would fix with a sort of initiation, like something like this, where the person is born and they're covered in feces, or reborn, and that this demonic character is either spraying sperm or cleansing this person. You could read this in any way that you really want, from the very structure of the play. The play is the movie is called Cloaca, but the play within the movie is it's about the god. Well, it's about the god Hermes, who attaches a man to a wheel. I think it's Ione, or what is it? He murders someone and he's attached to a wheel because he's evil or something. But it's connected to this story in some specific way, and to the religion of these deranged sort of Gnostic hermeticists that are sort of spelled out in this podcast that people should be aware of.
Sort of. It gets more complicated than that. So Gnosis, remember, is saving self-knowledge. It's knowledge about yourself that saves you from the imprisonment of the demiurge. You know that the demiurge is a demon, so that when
this is a close-up of the scene.
Your soul is to go, not where the demiurge would put it, but with God. That's the idea of Gnostic. It's a Christian.
You can kind of see the symbolism within the image here.
You actually are. You awaken to the gender soul inside of you, and you can actually live your life as who you were meant to be all along, contra society. It doesn't matter what society tells you. It doesn't matter what the doctors assign you at birth. You get to be who you are. So maybe you're non-binary. Maybe you're gender fluid. Maybe you're trans. Maybe you're just the other and you don't know what to do. You can see how it's a Gnostic understanding of yourself. It's very easy to understand queer theory as Gnostic that way. Now what about Hermetic? Hermeticism, I haven't covered it yet, so I guess spend a little time with it. It's more esoteric, it's more complicated. There are going to be future podcasts about this.
So the play within the movie that seems to have some sort of more foundational aspect to the movie itself, because it's what's in the poster itself. It's the the main picture in the poster, and it seems to have some sort of symbolic meaning, some undertones, and one of the main characters is homosexual, which I don't know what relevance that has to the story, but it seems like an unnecessary thing for the story, but it probably isn't, and this is probably his daughter or something. But the play in the movie is called The Wheel of, I can't pronounce this, Ixion. It's spelled Ixion. I think that's an I. I'm pretty sure it's an I. Ixion. And this character, Ixon, or I can't even, I'm not sure he'd pronounce it. Actually, it probably says here, Ixaron? I'm not sure. Ixion, I think, in Greek mythology, means strong native, was king of the Lapiths, the most ancient tribe of Thessaly. Ixion was the son of Ares or Leonidas or Antion and Permiel, or the notorious evildoer, someone else whose name. Ixion married Dia, a daughter of Dionysius, and promised his father-in-law a valuable present. However, he did not pay the bride price. This is an interesting symbolism there. So Dionysius stole some of Ixion's horses in retaliation. Ixion concealed his resentment and invited his father-in-law to a feast at Larissa, where Dionysius arrived. Ixion pushed him into a bed of burning coals and wood. These circumstances are secondary to the fact that Ixion's primordial act of murder, it could be accounted for quite differently. He committed a number of murders, and Zeus ordered Hermes to bind Ixion to a winged fiery wheel that was always spinning. Therefore, Ixion was bound to a burning solar wheel for all eternity. at first spinning across the heavens, but in later myth was transferred to Tartarus. I presume that has some symbolic meaning to this aspect of the story, and in some sort of perverted way. I'm assuming it's satanic.
It's hard, but the kind of a core thing of Hermeticism is that distinctions are an illusion. Anything that you think makes something different, like boy and girl, good and bad, whatever, it's all an illusion.
I know a lot of you guys are coping with pattern hair loss. My go-to recommendation is the Irish Store hair
Illusion. In truth,
I love
all is
commercials.
one. Sounds very New Age, right? Except it was written at least 600 years before Christ. It's not that New Age. All is one. And in my notes, like you'll see it often in their writing, one is all in caps, O-N-E, giant letters, right? Because and sometimes they put it in bold and all caps to really indicate that it's oneness beyond all oneness. Well, the problem is that distinctions become a way to knowing. So the way that you understand the world is that we live in this kind of paradoxical situation as a Hermeticist, where we know that the distinctions, this versus that, up versus down, left versus right, male versus female, we know that they're an illusion. There's just one undifferentiated, perfect whole, but the only way to actually understand the world we're in is through the distinctions, which we know are apparent. And so the goal is to overcome the distinctions and to see from the higher perspective of oneness, which is sometimes referred to literally in their literature as achieving not atonement, but at-one-ment, with hyphens and the word one separated, so it's pronounced at-one-ment with the universe. The reason is because in the Hermetic belief is God is one, though just one. Oneness. The whole oneness, everything in the whole universe is God. Perfect oneness. It's undifferentiated, overflowing oneness. But there's one fatal flaw with being completely undifferentiated. It can't know about itself. So God is undifferentiated perfection in its wholeness. But that means that God has no distinction by which God can know that God is God. That's the problem. So in this, there's a whole mythology, I'm not going to get into it in this podcast, but in this problem, in trying to solve this problem, God ends up thinking, because this is what God does. So first there's a thought, and in the thought, immediately, the mind of God is slightly different from God, although only an illusion, only an appearance. And that splits into the Logos and to Sophia, the male and female aspects of logic and wisdom. And through the process of this differentiation, they end up creating a world. The mundane world is created sort of as a dream of God or as a part of God. It's not separate from God, but it appears. It's an illusion of separateness and differentness, and mundane versus divine becomes a distinction, so that God now has an opposite. From the idea in Hermeticism is actually that the opposites, this is in Hegel as well, is that the opposite, the antithesis, arises from within the thesis. You think about the original thing, and suddenly its opposite appears. So God is perfect, whole divinity, and the mundane world arises out of that as its natural opposite. How could you know what divine is if you don't have the mundane to compare it to? So a binary of divine and mundane, with one superior and one subordinate, comes into existence by the mere question of what does it mean to be divine. So if God were to ask merely the question, what am I? Immediately, his perfect undifferentiated oneness says, well, I'm something that's undifferentiated, but how can I understand undifferentiation without differentiation? And something that's not God, in other words, fallen and dead, versus divine and alive, comes into existence. And that's the creation of the world in Hermeticism. Okay, so God, by his very nature of being a perfect creator, creates a world that seems, the mundane world that seems to be God's opposite, which is divine. And what has to happen is for God to become whole again, he has to have a means by which he can see that this distinction is an illusion. So seeing through this apparent distinction is what actually brings God back together into full wholeness, but now wholeness where God knows that he's God, as opposed to wholeness where God doesn't yet know that he's God. See, it's like Mao said, it's the desire for unity, then criticism that leads to unity on a new standard. It's exactly the same formula. It's the Hermetic formula. When Mao laid out criticism, unity, criticism, as we talked about in the podcast detailing those ideas, or in the longer podcast about this cultural revolution we're in, that formula is the Hermetic formula, undifferentiated to critiquing the falseness of the differentiation that appears.
So I refer to this as the Queer Gnostic Cult initiation into Filth. And that will be the title, I think, finally. So